You want to know when a cruel person has finally been seen for who they are? It's when their mask comes off and the situation they most feared happens to them. A person who lives to feel superior isn't just made humble, they fall apart. If you don't know the signs, you will think their breakdown is them becoming a better person. But believe me, it's not self-improvement, it's them being exposed. When a person with an inflated sense of self finally loses, their first and most basic reaction is to change the story and claim to be the victim. The person they hurt then realizes the time is here. They claim they are the one who has been wronged. They are drowning. They are facing the same bad end they caused others to face. This is not a small reaction or a slight change. It is often sudden, very dramatic, and affects everything. It's important to know that. This behavior doesn't come from real emotional pain or true regret. Instead, it's a careful mental trick meant to gain back control over how others see the situation and, more importantly, how others see them. For this type of person, controlling how others see them has always been their best weapon. When they realize they have lost their power over you or over a group they once easily controlled, they turn to being the victim. They make up complex stories about how they have been treated unfairly, misunderstood, betrayed, or abused. Details are changed, the context is left out, their hurtful actions are easily forgotten, and only their suffering is focused on. What makes this behavior especially harmful is how strongly emotional it is. The self-centered person won't just say they've been hurt, they will make a big scene out of it. They will blow up every small offense, make every disagreement seem huge, and make even simple boundaries you set look like acts of cruelty or leaving them alone. It's common for them to cry in public, post unclear messages on social media about being broken or mistreated, or contact shared friends with long, tearful speeches about their suffering, much less to look to the suffering of others. The goal behind this show is twofold. First, they want to find people to support them. By pretending to be a victim, they get sympathy from people who don't know the full story. These people, friends, family members, even co-workers, become their helpers, unknowingly doing the self-centered person's work by arguing with you, defending them, or sharing their twisted version of events. Second, they want to upset you emotionally. When you see them hurting, you may feel guilty, confused, or even caring. That is the trap. The self-centered person depends on your kindness to pull you back in, to make you second-guess your decision to set boundaries, or to make you apologize for things you didn't do. Beneath the act, there is almost never any real thought about themselves. What looks like pain is often just a bruised ego, the terrible realization that they can no longer control the story or the people around them. Instead of taking responsibility for what they did, they stick strongly to the belief that they have been unfairly targeted. This mental disagreement protects their fragile image of themselves. They cannot accept being wrong, so they change the story until they look like the noble, suffering hero. And here is the hardest part to watch. For a moment, it can seem real. The tears, the shaking voice, the claims of being left alone, they can all seem true. But if you step back and look closely, patterns will appear. The same person who is crying one moment will be angry or gossiping about you the next. The quick change from victim to aggressor shows the manipulation for what it really is, a desperate final try to regain control by any means necessary. When a person with an inflated ego finally faces a true and clear loss, one of the most revealing and risky changes is when their anger, which is usually aimed at others, suddenly turns inward. This collapse is not the same as regular sadness or normal depression. It is a complete breakdown of their self-image, a deep identity crisis, their carefully built image of being superior, in control, and great is destroyed. And what is left is something they have spent their whole life running from: emptiness. For most of their life, this person has survived by blaming others, putting their own doubts onto others, and manipulating people to meet their emotional needs. Anger and rage have been tools for control, scaring others, silencing those who disagree, and making people walk carefully around them. But when they finally meet a situation they cannot overcome, whether it is someone refusing to talk to them, a relationship ending for good, or their social group walking away, their usual ways to vent their anger are gone. There is no one left to attack, no one left to confuse. The wall they used to push against has disappeared, and with that, the anger turns in on itself. What appears is a state of deep mental paralysis. They may stop going to work, stop talking to friends and family, or spend days alone in bed. Some may lose interest in taking care of themselves or stop doing things they once did, often to keep up their image. They are not used to facing the empty feeling inside they have hidden under layers of confidence. When they are forced to sit with it, it becomes overwhelming. Feelings of worthlessness, not being good enough, and shame rush in, emotions they have spent years avoiding at all costs. But it's crucial to realize that this depressed state is not the same as a true emotional realization or real regret. The self-centered person is not sad about the hurt they have caused others. They are sad about the downfall of their fake self. The pain is not about a moral failure, it is about the huge damage to their identity. The loss of control over how people see them feels like a form of death, a mental destruction. Their inner thoughts, once full of grand ideas, become filled with self-hate and hopelessness. However, this self-hate does not lead to change. It leads to staying stuck in bitterness. Sometimes in this phase, they might reach out with desperate emotional messages, not to apologize, but to get back control or pull others back into their emotional space. They may talk about how broken they feel, how no one understands them, how unfair life has been. This is not honest vulnerability in a healthy way. It is a planned despair used as a last manipulative trick to get attention and sympathy again. If these tries fail, the self-centered person often sinks deeper into being alone. If left alone, this inward anger may turn into self-harming behaviors, using drugs or alcohol, reckless spending, or taking dangerous risks. They are trying to fill the emptiness or punish themselves for losing control, but it is never followed by real self-reflection. At its core, this depressive collapse is not healing. It is another defense mechanism, one that turns their anger inward when there is no one left outside to blame, when a person focused on themselves experiences a real defeat, especially one that threatens how the public sees them or their social standing. One of their most expected and destructive behaviors is to start a campaign to destroy the reputation of the person they hold responsible. This is not a casual reaction or a moment of anger. It is a planned, constant, and often highly deceptive effort to destroy another person's reputation, believability, and relationships. The self-centered person knows that if they can no longer control you directly, they can still try to control how others see you. This gives them a lasting feeling of power, even when they are personally falling apart. The process usually begins slowly. They will introduce doubts about your character in talks with shared friends, co-workers, or family members. It starts with phrases like, "I'm really worried about them," or "I don't know if they're doing well mentally." This hides their real intent behind false concern. From there, the stories grow. They may twist private details you once shared secretly, taking things out of context to make you look unstable, abusive, or toxic. Events are changed, often flipped around, making them appear as the long-suffering victim and you as the aggressor. This campaign is driven by more than just meanness. It's about survival. For the self-centered person, image is everything. Their identity is often based on how others see them. When they lose control over one person, they fear others might start seeing through their pretense too. So they strike first, ruining the situation before the truth has a chance to come out. They want to make sure that if you ever speak up about the abuse or manipulation you suffered, you will already be dismissed in the eyes of others. The tactics they use are different, but they often rely heavily on involving a third party, turning people against each other to create confusion and division. They may tell one friend one version of events and another friend a completely different story, ensuring that no one has a clear picture of what actually happened. This mess keeps the self-centered person at the center of attention and forces people to take sides, which often leads to the targeted person becoming alone. Another key sign of this behavior is the self-centered person's ability to seem charming and persuasive to outsiders. They may become unusually caring, generous, or charming in public during this time. This is a defensive move meant to make the target's accusations seem impossible. After all, how could such a kind, well-spoken, and beloved person be capable of manipulation or cruelty? This performance often leaves the victim feeling even more confused and powerless. For those being targeted, this campaign to ruin their reputation can feel like social death. Friendships may break up, family relationships may become strained, professional opportunities can disappear. And through all of this, the self-centered person will continue to watch from the side, feeding on the negative results as a source of twisted comfort. Their only goal is to change the story so they come out spotless, and you become the villain. When a self-centered person suffers a big loss, the threat to their public image feels like a direct threat to their survival. Their identity is often based completely on how others see them. When that perception starts to fall apart, They go into high gear with desperate image management. This is not slow or quiet. It is immediate, planned, and frantic. Their mind switches to damage control, and every action becomes about saving their reputation and regaining praise or sympathy from others. One of the first things you will notice is a sudden change in their behavior, especially in public or on social media. The same person who was cold, distant, or even abusive just days ago may now seem overly positive, compassionate, and self-aware. They may start sharing inspirational quotes, posts about improving themselves, or messages about forgiveness and understanding. These are not real signs of change. They are a strategic effort to reshape the story. They want people to think, wow, look how much they've grown up, or they're really going through a personal transformation. In reality, the self-centered person is performing for an audience beyond social media. They will often perform exaggerated acts of generosity or kindness toward others. They might suddenly get involved in charity work, go out of their way to help friends in need, or offer apologies to people they haven't spoken to in years. These actions are not acts of real kindness. They are carefully chosen moves meant to create a good difference between their newly created public persona and the accusations or criticisms being aimed at them. During this phase, the self-centered person may also become very aware of how they look and act. They will control their voice tone, posture, and even facial expressions to appear as kind and stable as possible. They may start using therapy language, using terms like healing, growth, or accountability, words they barely understood or valued before their defeat. It is important to understand that none of this comes from real inner work. It is a survival tactic, pure and simple. If people around them start to question their past behavior, they will often avoid the issue with statements like, I'm not perfect, but I'm working on myself, or we've all made mistakes. These unclear admissions are designed to look like they are taking responsibility while avoiding any specific recognition of what they did. It is a clever way of stopping criticism without ever having to face it directly. Another key part of this frantic image management is their constant need to monitor how others are reacting. They will subtly ask friends and acquaintances for feedback, trying to figure out if their new image is being accepted. If they sense resistance or disbelief, they may double down on their efforts, creating even more dramatic displays of virtue and self-improvement. At its core, this behavior is about restoring control over how others see them, and by extension, how they feel about themselves. It is a performance staged for the audience they value most, the people whose approval feeds their fragile sense of worth. And until the threat to their image passes, the performance will not stop. When all their usual tricks have failed and they feel truly cornered, the self-centered person often uses one of their most extreme and manipulative behaviors: weaponized self-destruction. This is not simple despair or a genuine emotional breakdown. It is a calculated, though sometimes unconscious, strategy to create guilt, fear, and panic in the people around them. The message they send, either directly or indirectly, is painfully clear. If you leave me or hold me responsible, look at what you are making me do to myself. This trick can take many forms. Some will threaten self-harm, suggesting or directly stating that they cannot continue without the person they are losing control over. Others might spiral into reckless behaviors, using drugs or alcohol, dangerous driving, financial sabotage, or dramatic public meltdowns, all with the goal of creating an emotional crisis large enough to pull people back in. They are not acting out of true hopelessness, but rather out of fear of losing control, losing attention, and losing the audience they have depended on for validation. The most harmful part of this behavior is the emotional trap it sets for those around them. Loved ones, friends, and even casual acquaintances are suddenly put in an impossible position. On one hand, they want to protect and help someone who seems to be in real pain. On the other hand, they sense that something feels manipulative, staged, or too much for the situation. The self-centered person thrives in this confusing area. By manufacturing a crisis, they create an environment where sensible thinking is overshadowed by emotional urgency. They want people to act quickly, without thinking, and most importantly, with sympathy. What makes this trick even more manipulative is the person's ability to switch between helplessness and aggression with alarming speed. One moment they are sobbing, threatening self-harm, or talking about their worthlessness. The next moment they lash out with anger if their emotional blackmail does not get the desired result. This cycle of vulnerability and hostility keeps others confused, reactive, and emotionally tied up for the self-centered person. This behavior serves multiple purposes. First, it is a distraction. Instead of focusing on the person's wrongdoing or manipulative past, everyone's attention now shifts to managing the current emotional crisis. Second, it is a form of punishment. By causing visible harm to themselves or by putting themselves in danger, they punish others for not giving them what they want. Third, it is a method of regaining power. If people rush back to help or soften their stance, the self-centered person sees this as a small win. It is important to note that while some self-centered people may not consciously plan this behavior, it is still deeply manipulative. They have learned over time that these dramatic actions pull people back in, stop conversations about accountability, and create feelings of guilt strong enough to override someone's boundaries. Ultimately, weaponized self-destruction is not about healing or seeking real help. It is a last resort trick, used when all other forms of control have failed. It leaves lasting emotional damage on those who care, and it reinforces the person's toxic cycle of manipulation and avoidance of true responsibility. When a self-centered person faces defeat and realizes that their usual manipulation tricks are no longer working, they often turn to a different approach. Brief moments of clear understanding. These sudden moments of apparent self-awareness and personal insight can seem, at first glance, like genuine breakthroughs. The self-centered person may express regret, apologize for past behavior, and even talk about deep personal realizations. They might mention books on healing, quote psychological ideas, or speak openly about their flaws in a way they never have before. To outsiders, it can look like a major turning point, the moment everyone has been hoping for. However, below the surface, these moments of insight are rarely genuine. They are survival tactics, triggered by fear of losing control or permanently damaging their reputation and relationships. The self-centered person senses that something drastic is needed to pull people back in, so they perform a kind of emotional theater, playing the role of the apologetic and enlightened person. They carefully choose their apologies to say exactly what the other person wants to hear. Their words sound sincere, and their delivery is often tearful, thoughtful, and vulnerable. But there is one major flaw. Their insight is shallow and does not last long. The problem with these sudden realizations is that they lack the essential parts of real change: consistent action, long-term accountability, and genuine empathy for others. The self-centered person may talk about their faults one day and repeat the same harmful behaviors the next. Their emotional promises disappear as quickly as they appeared. Their promises remain forever. Their promise fades. The silence is louder. The person may be misleading, but it can happen. The reason for this is simple. The moment of clear understanding was not rooted in a desire to grow, but in a desire to regain control over the story and the people around them. This cycle of false awakening can be deeply confusing and emotionally draining for the people in their life. Just as others begin to set boundaries or distance themselves, the self-centered person will launch into their grand speech about change. They will attend therapy for a session or two, read a self-help book, or post long reflections on social media about accountability and growth. They may even start conversations with phrases like, "I've done a lot of thinking," or "I'm finally starting to understand how I've hurt people." But when you watch closely, the same patterns quickly return. Blaming others, manipulation, and emotional instability. Another reason these moments of insight do not last is that they are often driven by outside consequences rather than internal motivation. The self-centered person feels cornered, abandoned, or publicly exposed. So they respond in the only way they know how, by adapting temporarily to appear likable and trustworthy again. Once the immediate threat passes and people begin to soften toward them, the self-centered person relaxes, drops the act, and returns to their old behavior. For those on the receiving end, it is important to resist the urge to see these moments as signs of permanent change. Real transformation takes time, effort, and humility, none of which the self-centered person is truly prepared to give. These brief moments of clear understanding are just another layer of manipulation dressed up as self-awareness, designed to pull you back into their cycle and keep you emotionally involved. So, here is the harsh truth.